Hi, my name is Chris and I'll teach you how to build an iOS app that displays YouTube videos of your choosing. In this example, I've configured this app to fetch videos from my How to Build an App in 8 Days playlist and display all the videos from there. The great thing is that this app actually connects to the YouTube Data API. So if you remove or add videos to the playlist on YouTube, it'll automatically get reflected in the app without you having to revise any sort of code. Oh, and you'll also be able to tap into the videos and watch the videos in the app or to read the video description. Okay, so let's take a look now at what skills you'll gain after completing this app. All right, so by completing this app, you're going to learn how to work with the YouTube Data API. You're going to learn how to send and receive network requests to and from your app. And in doing so, you're going to learn a little bit about iOS concurrency, especially using async await. And through the process of doing this, we're going to need to be able to debug and troubleshoot our network issues. And we're going to learn how to do that using Proxyman, a free third-party tool. When we get the data back from the YouTube API, we're going to need to turn that JSON and parse it into usable structures and instances inside our app. So you're going to learn about JSON parsing and how to do that. And we're also going to need to store our API key securely in our Xcode project so that it doesn't accidentally get leaked out. Now, most of this networking stuff we covered in the iOS networking course. So although we are going to go over that again in this video series, it won't be as in-depth. So if you really want to learn that material well and you want to dive a little deeper, check out the networking course. All right, now on the iOS app side, we are going to use YouTube Player Kit, which is a third-party library to be playing the YouTube videos in the app. And we're going to import that into our Xcode project using Swift Package Manager. Now on the UI side, you're going to learn how to use Swift UI lists, geometry reader, async image, progress views, scroll views, just to name a few, but there's a lot more that goes into building the user interface. And you're going to get extra practice just working with UIs. Okay, so let's do a quick little overview of how this all works in case you're new to working with APIs. And if you have used APIs before, then this will just be a little review for you. Now, an API is an interface that you can connect to send and receive data. To put it in simpler terms, you can think of an API as a collection of URLs that your app can access to retrieve data or to send data. Now, there are many APIs out there. Some are free and some are paid, but most of the large platforms like Facebook, X, Spotify, Google, they all have APIs for you to work with that platform or to retrieve data from it. And there are some APIs that are just data focused, such as retrieving recipes or stock prices or weather data, things like that. So being able to use APIs in your app is very, very powerful. So what actually happens and how do you use an API from your app? Well, from your iOS app, you send a network request to an API endpoint, which remember is just a URL. In your network request, you specify what data you want to get back. And in some APIs, you also have to identify yourself in the request. This identification part is called authentication. The API receives your request and it will authenticate you and also make sure that your request is valid. Note that not all APIs require authentication, but most do. Now, if your authentication checks out and your request is valid, then the API will go ahead and gather the data and send a response to your app. The response contains the data that you requested, and it's typically in a format called JSON. When your app receives the response, it can read the JSON formatted data and then convert it into data that can be displayed on the screen for the user to see. This process of converting the JSON data into usable data in your app, this is called JSON parsing. All right, so this is the process that you're going to learn how to do with the YouTube API. Now, let's take a look at the YouTube API. I hope you're enjoying the lesson so far. Now, just in case you want to launch your own app, I want to tell you about CWC Plus. This step-by-step program will help you launch your own app even if you don't have any experience. And it takes about 4 months. If this sounds like something you're interested in, I have a special offer for you. I'll leave the link in the description below this video, and hopefully I'll see you there. If not, no worries. I really appreciate that you're here watching this lesson and learning with us. So thank you for that. Anyways, now back to the lesson. All right, so here we are, the YouTube Data API. You can visit this page at developers.google.com/YouTube. I want you to go under this section that says Add YouTube Data and click References. And here you can see all of the endpoints that are available in this API for our app to send a request to. Now remember, these endpoints, they're just URLs. So let's take, for instance, search. So let's look at overview first. This describes to you what this endpoint does, how you interact with it, and it lists different methods, different ways you can use this endpoint. So let's take a look at list. Okay, when you click into that, you can see that changed to this section here. And the common use cases, okay? So this is essentially searching YouTube for something. You can search by, here's some use cases, by keyword, which is probably the typical example, right? Location, live events, or your videos, for instance. If you scroll a little lower, this is the important part here. This is telling you the exact URL that you need to hit. So this is the endpoint. And this is the request type. So when you send a network request, it can be one of a few different types. And GET is the one that's typically used for when you want to retrieve data from the API. Okay, so not only do you need to send a request to this URL, but you need to specify parameters of your request. Remember, if you're searching for something on YouTube, what are you searching for? You can't just say search, right? So here, these parameters, they describe what you can specify along with your request in order to tell the API what you want to retrieve or what you're searching for in this case. So let's take a look here. One thing I should mention here is in the parameter section, there's always, not always, but there may be required parameters. So remember in that overview, I said that the API checks your request to see if it's valid. Well, if it is a required parameter, then you have to specify this information. The optional ones you can leave out, but the required ones you have to include as part of your request. So what is this required parameter? Okay, so this part, it's called part. This parameter specifies a comma-separated list of one or more search resource properties that the API response will include. Set the parameter value to snippet. Okay, so it's a little hard to determine what these things mean, but what I'll typically say is to try it out. You know, the next step is to try out this API. Let's set this parameter to snippet as it says, and then let's see what gets returned. And if it's not what we're looking for, we can probably look at what else we can specify for this parameter. Now what I'm looking for is if we want to search for something specific, like a keyword, where would we do that, or what would we do? So this is searching by location, this is searching by event, this is searching for types of channel, a specific channel you can look for, how many results you want. This is the one. The Q parameter specifies the query term to search for. So if you wanted to search for videos regarding, let's say, gardening, right? You would put the gardening keyword in this parameter. And I'll show you a little later how you assign that data to these parameters, but we're not going to dive that deep. Just wanted to give you an overview of the YouTube API and all the endpoints that are available, and also how these endpoints work, right? So you learned about the URL. This is the URL that you're going to send the request to. This is your request type, and there are required parameters that you have to specify, and then there are optional ones that would give more context for your request. Now, the endpoint that we are going to use in this video series, remember, so this app, it can display any YouTube video, and it can play it in the app. So for my use case, I want to display a list of videos from a specific playlist because I have a YouTube channel and I have some playlists that I want to display the videos for. So the endpoint that I'm going to use is playlists right here, and I'm going to use, actually, I believe it was, I can't remember if it was playlists or videos at this point. Okay, so let's take a look at this endpoint. So here is the playlist endpoint, get, and if we take a look at the use case, let's see, it retrieves all playlists, or yeah, all playlists for a channel. That's not what I want. This one is, let's see, the request that I use retrieves a specific playlist, and I believe it was this endpoint, because there is, let's see, the ID specifies that being retrieved. Yeah, this is what I used. Okay, so instead of retrieving all playlists from the channel, I wanted a specific one. So I had to include this parameter here, which was called ID, and this is the ID of the specific playlist that I want. And then within that playlist, I also got the videos. After you complete this video series and you follow along and you learn how to use this YouTube Data API, feel free to change the way that the app works, right? You can implement search in your app if you'd want. Just put a text field, right? When the user types something in, call this endpoint. Pass in the keyword that the user searched for and return a list of video results, and the user can play it right in the app, right? What I'm going to show you in the video series is using this endpoint, showing a specific list of videos. Or you can curate your own playlist, or maybe curate specific videos that you want to show, and you might use another endpoint. So feel free to customize the app. But I would recommend, especially if you're new to working with APIs and networking, to follow along in this video series. Wait till the end, get comfortable after you've achieved the result, and then customize it. All right, now let's take a look at authentication, because this YouTube Data API needs to identify who you are before it's going to give up its data. Now, before I show you the YouTube authentication part, I want to point out this line right here. These endpoints, they all have a quota impact, and it tells you how much it costs to send a request and to get a response from this endpoint. And that has everything to do with the authentication stuff. So now let's move on to there. Now we're going to click on guides. Typically with API documentation, all the authentication stuff is all the way at the beginning. So here it tells you how to do that. Let's go into overview. Actually, let's go into get auth credentials here. And you'll see that there are two different types that you can, two different techniques that you can go about this. So one is OAuth and one is API keys. Now, most APIs will use one or the other, and sometimes both. But if I were to throw out a number out there, I would say 90% of APIs, you can use API keys. Let me explain briefly the difference between the two. So API key authentication is where you sign up for an account and they give you a long string of letters and numbers. That is your key. And when you're making network requests to the API, you're going to specify that key with your request. And that way they can associate that request with your account. And then they can also rate limit you. They can see how much you're using the API, if you're abusive, if you are, mostly rate limiting, giving you quota and things like that. Because you can imagine if it's unlimited and as fast as possible and everyone is hitting their API, it could take it down, or the server load could be too high. So this allows them to control access to their API. And if they find you to be abusive, they could ban your key and you won't be able to make requests anymore. So that's how API key authentication works. Now, OAuth is a little bit different. This is where you typically see a username and password box in your app, and the user has to sign into their Google account. And by doing that, they are obtaining a token from the API. And then you attach that token to the requests that you send. So there's a distinction because now they're associating those requests with the user's Google account. So no longer are you being rate limited. It's not counting towards your quota, it's counting towards their quota. And also what you can do is different because now that Google can identify their Google account, that user can perform things like liking a video or subscribing to a video. You can call those types of endpoints, right? Or perhaps following a user. Whereas API key access right? All of your users, they're using the same API key, the one that you signed up for, that's associated to your account. So that's why with API keys, you can't really do things like liking a video or subscribing to a channel, because the API has no idea who the user is. All they can see is that they can associate this API key to your account that you created. Now, OAuth is a little bit more involved, so we're not going to use that in this video series. We're going to go through the API key route, and learning how to do that is going to cover the vast majority of APIs that you'll encounter. All right, so now let's go on to the next step, which is actually creating an account and getting our API key. So all you have to do is follow this credentials page link, and I'm going to open it in a new tab. It's going to ask you to sign into your Google account. Because I'm already signed in, it's brought me into this credentials page of my project. You probably won't have a project either. So let me try to go back out onto the dashboard. And you might have to go through some onboarding questions or something like that. But eventually you'll arrive at a page that looks like something like this, because right here it's saying I have a project, but you won't have a project. So it might prompt you to create a new project. You can go ahead and do that, or you can click on this drop down up here. And then we can choose new project, and we can create a project together. Oh, it looks like I cannot create a new project, but this is what you would do. So you would type in a project name. You would, I don't think this one matters too much. So you can choose whatever and just hit create. And then once you've created a project, right, go ahead and navigate to that project. So for me, that would be this one right here. And you're going to click on credentials, or sorry, API and services. And then you're going to go down to credentials. And then once you get here, this is where you can create the API key. So you're going to say create credentials, create API key. It's going to generate one for you. And then you're going to have to restrict it to the YouTube Data API. That would be good. Let me refresh the screen. Did it do it for me? There it is. Okay, so this is the new API key that was just created. I'm going to click into it. And then I am going to set the restrict right here. I'm going to restrict it to a specific API. And the reason this is a good idea is just so that if the API key gets into the wrong hands, I mean, it limits what they can do to just using the YouTube Data API. And I think it's a good practice to not just give free rein to everything. Restricting things and removing options is always good, especially if you don't need those options, because it limits it limits any unexpected behavior. Same thing goes for programming, right? And I wouldn't set restrictions on that. I mean, you could do this, but it's going to it might interfere with your testing, especially if this is your first time. So let's just choose none. Restrict the key to the YouTube Data API. There's your API key right there. You shouldn't be showing this to anyone. I won't be using this key, so don't try to copy it and use this key. I'll probably delete this after, but go ahead and save it. And there you go. You have a valid key that you can use, and you're gonna be using this key inside your iOS project. All right, now we're set. All right, now we're ready to start using the YouTube Data API. In the next lesson, we're going to build a test project to connect to the API and retrieve data from it. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and also comment down below what you're most excited about learning in this app series. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.